pepper steak. As you can see before me, the ingredients. We have some beef broth, some peppercorns, olive oil, onions, peppers, and steak. Steak cut varies depending on your preference. This will be cooked at camp, cut into strips, finger-sized strips, and add it to the sauce we're making later. Options. Type of peppers doesn't matter. We like our onions, so we're adding 2. You can add 1. The amount of peppercorns depends on how peppery you like it. You can also add hot sauce to it at the end if you want to spice it up even more. I would like to say that we are going winter camping. It's early winter. We're prepping this the night before. We're going to put this in a container, only making the sauce, cooking the steak on the fire, slicing the steak up once it rests, and then adding it to the sauce all in the frying pan all together. We're going to start off with starting up and getting some heat in the pan and moving the flammable stuff away from the fire. There we go. As the pan warms up, we're going to prep some veggies. We're going to start off with the onions. I will say that everybody has their own version of pepper steak. This is one I was taught years ago when I worked in a Roadhouse version restaurant. It's one I prefer. It ends up having some cream added to the sauce. At the end, it makes it nice and rich. You could add mushrooms to this as well, which is an option we might do tomorrow after I discuss with the people I'm going with. Everybody likes it done a little differently. Some people cut the steak raw and add it to the pan to add more flavor to their gravy base. I prefer to cook the steak on the fire so that the steak is nice and smoky and campfire tasting, because why aren't you cooking on a fire? All the time. The chop varies too. You don't want to mince it, you want to slice them. You want that texture. You want it all kind of matching the finger slivers of the beef, the slices of onion like this, and then the slices of peppers as well. You can also choose to get rid of this part of the pepper if that's your preference as well. Everyone's a little different. Some people don't like wasting it. We're fortunate enough to have friends that have chickens, so any of the kitchen waste gets recycled to them, and then we end up getting farm fresh eggs in exchange, so life works out beautifully. Here the pan's starting to sizzle. I'm going to add my oil now that the pan's hot. Just about a tablespoon of oil. You want to sweat the onions, but you don't want to drown them in oil, so the fact that they almost poach in it or deep fry. The timing of the peppercorns vary too, depending on the seasoning and the way you want to season it and the freshness of your peppercorns. I prefer to add them at this point before I add my onions. So I'm just going to put them in a mortar and pestle and crush them up a bit so that people at camp aren't picking big chunks of peppercorn out of their teeth all night while they're trying to enjoy scotch by the fire. It's peppercorn in your teeth and scotch. Well, maybe that's a new thing. Maybe we're getting onto something. If you don't have a mortar and pestle, I've also seen chefs place them on the cutting board, use the edge of their knife, and grind it like so. They fly everywhere. I've seen people also put them on a cutting board and use a cast iron frying pan to crush them. If you have a spice grinder, you just want a coarse grind. You want them to toast, and I don't have a spatula handy in my kitchen area. So I'm just going to do that. Just want to get it starting and then add the onion. And there's always that one pepper that gets in too early. So while the onion's starting to sweat and get a nice translucent color, it's going to continue chopping and prepping veggies. You want a consistent size so they cook evenly, and that looks good. So while this is cooking, let's talk about prepping time. We choose to do it this way. You could choose to bring all this raw product out to camp, make it at camp. Thank you, Marla. If that's your preference, you don't want to prep it up ahead. I love to cook at camp. I do enjoy prepping stuff at camp and cooking from scratch at camp. I think it's a challenge that a lot of people enjoy. And I think for some people that are new at camping, it's something they're familiar with, starting from beginning to end and not having to break it up into steps. So as you can see, there's lots of pepper on that, and that's good because it's not called pepper steaks for the green and red peppers, in my opinion. It's called pepper steaks for the peppercorn that are going to flavor the gravy. That was about a tablespoon and a half of peppercorn that was ground up in the mortar and pestle, and it depends on your portioning. We're doing 4 steaks. This is going to be mixed in, this will be almost full, and then this gravy is going to be mixed in with a lovely bunch of stuff in a larger frying pan once we add the beef. And you'll see that in the next segment when we're out at camp. So these are almost translucent. I'm going to add this. This is going to do 2 things. It's going to also start the peppers cooking, but it's also going to cool my pan down because the temperature is getting a little hot right now in there. It's getting hot because I'm here. Okay. You know I'm right. We're just going to gently stir this in. So you always have those three choices. You can bring all this raw stuff out in the cooler, prep it at camp, cook it from scratch at camp, and then enjoy your meal. The con to that is that you have more pepper and larger stuff to transport out, depending on how and where you're going. Are you going to the cottage? Are you going to a trailer? Are you going to winter camp in a hot tent? You have to pull this stuff in a sled. That doesn't bother you. That's fine. I enjoy sitting around the fire. I enjoy socializing. As much as I like being the camp chef, I also don't like missing out on the social aspect of hanging around with people. So I try to get as much prep done before camp as possible. You can see the peppers are starting to sweat a bit. They're almost at a point where we're ready to add the broth. The third option I find is you can make all of this now. I could barbecue the steak, slice it, or pan fry it and slice it, add it in to the gravy and everything else, and we could have a lovely big container of peppercorn steak that I can just dump out in a frying pan, cook up on the fire and warm back up, and we can all dig in and eat it whenever we're ready to eat it. And that comes with trip planning as much as preference. If we're going to go out snowshoeing all day and all of us are coming back to camp when it's dark, the last thing I want to be doing is using big knives, chopping onions and stuff by headlamp, worrying about losing a finger. So we don't want to do that. But we're not too worried because we're actually at trailers this weekend. So we have the extra backup plan that if the fire doesn't get hot enough or if we run too late with our hike, we can always cook this in the trailer on the stove. The other option you have is to do this all up, dehydrate their peppers, dehydrate their onions, bring steak in frozen. Let's say you're doing this in the summer canoe camping, have it on the first or second day, depending on the temperature and how long you can maintain your steak and the choice of cooling and refrigeration of your food. Rehydrate stuff and pan fry it. That's an option. We can take that to the next level on another segment if subscribers so desire to challenge me on that. So here we go. You can see the peppers are coating everything. We're going to get that flavor throughout the gravy. So you can tell by the pressure I'm putting on here, they're still nice and firm, or if you want to get technical, al dente, firm to the bite. I wouldn't say they're raw. They're starting to warm up nicely. The onions are starting to caramelize, which is really nice in the gravy when they get to this stage. Really distribute that sweet flavor that we're extracting from the onion. And now comes the broth. The broth is going to do two things. It's going to give a nice flavored base to our sauce, but it's going to deglaze and lift all those toasted peppers and caramelized onions off the bottom. How much broth depends on how soupy you want it. I like a nice sloppy pepper steak because then it runs into your mashed potatoes. You just get to put it in with your bannock and slop it up. But again, if you prefer a little less of a mess, that's fine. So that is successfully lifted up stuff. The pan feels very smooth on the bottom now. It doesn't have that bunched up onion and peppers along it. Judging from the 4 steaks that we have, picture them cooking, shrinking a bit, and then me slicing it up, maybe getting rid of some of this fat so people aren't chewing through a lot of fat when it's all sliced up. We're going to have quite a bit of steak that goes in a pan. So I'm going to need quite a bit of gravy to coat that steak and flavor it. So I'm going to add just a bit more here to the mix. And we're just going to patiently let this come up to a boil and reduce a bit. Now, thickening this, we have some options. We could have started off when we added the onions and that to add some butter and flour, make a roux, and then cook that roux out, and that would have thickened the sauce nicely. We could do a whitewash where we take some of this gravy out, water down some flour, re-add the flour mixture, and that would thicken up the sauce too. You could thicken it with cornstarch if that's your desire, and that would, same thing, taking out about 2 tablespoons of the broth, mixing in a bowl with about a tablespoon of cornstarch, making a little bit of a slurry, and then adding it back in. But the thing I like to do, because why not get fat while you're at camp, I'm going to add cream to this at camp. So we're going to bring out about a cup of cream, and when this is all simmering on the campfire with the pieces of steak in it and all that, I'm going to throw in cream and let it simmer for about 10 minutes on the fire. And all this is going to blend together and make just a beautiful sauce that the steak's just going to marry in with. And then the smokiness of the steak being grilled on the fire mixed in with all of this. I'm sorry, my mouth is watering. This is going to be delicious supper tomorrow night. So, again, reviewing, you always have choices. You have to do what's trip dependent. You have to decide what's happening on your trip, who's all coming, what people like, what people don't like. You don't force people to eat what they don't like. One of the individuals coming doesn't like pepper that much. We're doing a chicken version for her tomorrow night, but not with pepper. And she doesn't like onions. So we're just going to adapt and not force people to eat what they don't want. And we're going to make a big frying pan of this pepper steak, and if there's leftovers, we can take it home. Because with our choices, we're at the trailer. We are pulling stuff in on a sled, so we have that conveyance of pulling things and not carrying it all on our back. And we have that option, so we're going to take advantage of that and just take it easy and not stress out about stuff. If we were going into the interior of Algonquin Park this summer and I was going to do this, I'd be definitely dehydrating the peppers and the onions. I would be bringing cracked peppercorn already. I wouldn't be freshly cracking it. And the steak would be steak, and it would be frozen, and I would make sure that stays for a day or two, and then cook it up. So this is definitely a day 1 or day 2 dish if you're in a canoe trip. Yes, you could haul peppers in whole, but the downside of that when you're in interior camping is you have all this to deal with. So this is what's left over of the peppers. Why would I carry that on 3 portages my first day? And what do I do with it? Do I burn that in a fire? I'll tell you what happens sometimes with that, and I've seen it in the park. Some people put that in the privy box, the thunder box. And that upsets me because now when I'm camping there, animals think that there's a free lunch because they smell a campfire. So, first of all, plan your trip. Second of all, burn your rubbish or take it out with you and keep that stuff in your food barrel and keep it all week. And finally, don't put stuff in the privy that isn't toilet paper or your own private mess. And this isn't your private mess. So, I think that's a polite way of saying it, right? Okay, good. You can see the broth is coming up and starting to steam and boil. It looks and smells delicious. We're just going to let that reduce probably by about 1/8 of an inch in the pan. And by then too, that'll get everything nice and tender. They're already starting to feel tender. I still can't cut the pepper when I put pressure on it. The thinner ones I can, but the thicker ones I can't. So probably about another 2 minutes at this pace, and then we're going to dump that in a container. And again, because we're pulling things in by sled, and it's winter, and it's cold out, and I'm not worried about refrigeration, I'm just going to use a Tupperware container. It's reusable, it's environmentally friendly. When we're out at camp, if there's leftovers after this gets washed, we can always put it back in. Judging from the amount of food we have, there'll probably be leftovers, and there's nothing wrong with that. We might have that for lunch the second day we're there. So we're just going to roll with it. So it's been about 3.5 minutes. The sauce has reduced. The peppers are nice and tender. I can break them when I put a little bit of pressure with my spatula. As you can see, they fold in 2 and snap. That's beautiful. So I'm just going to turn off the heat. Cast iron will hold the heat for a while, but we're not interested in that today. I'm just going to make sure I scrape the bottom a bit. And as you can see, it just smells so delicious right now. You get the sweet smell of the peppers, the spiciness of the peppercorn. So what we've decided is that we're just going to put this in a container and haul it out on a sled tomorrow. Can't forget those good little pieces of onion. There we go. We'll let that cool. Make it your own. If you don't like yellow peppers, put more green peppers. If you don't like peppers at all, then just fry a steak and onions, because what's the point of having pepper steak? So enjoy your camp day, enjoy your food, and enjoy the outdoors. Thank you.